Welcome to Time Traveling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Paddy. This week we kick off Season 11 with the introduction of a new companion and a trip to the past in The Time Warrior. We'll be discussing the Doctor, the companions and the villains and giving our thoughts on the story as a whole.
We'd also love to hear your thoughts on the story. So, to join the discussion, you can check us out at Time Teamp, that's TimeTeamp, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteamp@teamproductions.com. Now, Paddy, why don't you kick us off for Season 11 with your lovely story recap?
Before I begin that, I feel like we should make another public safety announcement. Please do not listen to this podcast while you are cycling.
No, you can.
As our...
No, okay, no. Let's not alter everyone's lives just because of Paul, right? You can listen to the podcast while cycling, but please just be aware of your surroundings when listening to podcasts at all times. Not just ours, but everybody's.
Yes.
And I hope you're okay, Paul.
Yes. Okay, on with the recap. Part 1. In a medieval castle, the warlord Irongron and his subordinate Bloodaxe are eating in the Great Hall. Irongron is dissatisfied with the quality of the food, and Bloodaxe informs him that their stockpiles are low and they need to replenish, and suggests raiding the storehouses of the local lord, Sir Edward. Bloodaxe then spots a star falling into the forest where it glows brightly, and Irongron rouses the rest of his men so that he can go claim it. Bloodaxe and the others are reluctant to go into the forest at night due to their superstitious nature, and Irongron reluctantly agrees to wait until morning. They arrive at the landing site and discover it to be a pod-shaped spaceship. An armoured figure emerges from it and disarms Irongron with an electronic baton before telling them that he intends them no harm. He introduces himself as Lynx, an officer of the Sontaran Empire, and then claims the planet in the name of the Empire. He is then taken back to Irongron's castle under guard, and he asks for their aid in repairing his ship, which he warns Irongron against tampering with lest it explode. When Irongron threatens to kill him, Lynx offers to give him weapons that would allow him to take over the entire country. Irongron agrees to give him access to his forge and armory, but Lynx says that he will need to acquire advanced technology in order to fix the drive mechanism. In the present day, the Brigadier is showing the Doctor to his temporary accommodation at a secret research facility. He reveals that several top scientists, as well as millions of pounds worth of equipment, have been mysteriously vanishing. As a result, he's decided to sequester the remaining leading scientists at the facility until the causes of the disappearances have been discovered. Unbeknownst to them, the scientists and the equipment are currently in the possession of Lynx, who has set them up in the armory of Irongron's castle where they are working on his ship. As part of their tentative alliance, Lynx has supplied Irongron and his men with rifles to use in their upcoming raids and to keep them from interfering in his work. Meanwhile, the Doctor is greeted by another scientist, Professor Joseph Rubish, who gives out about the Brigadier's security arrangements, and the irony is not lost on the Doctor as he defends the Brigadier's actions. They are then joined by a young woman, who Rubish introduces as Lavinia Smith, whom the Doctor recognizes as the name belonging to an eminent virologist. However, he confides in her that she appears to be too young for the work that she had previously written, and the woman reveals that her name is Sarah Jane Smith and she is Lavinia's niece. She reveals that she is a journalist and took the place of her aunt to investigate the story behind the disappearances. She asks the Doctor not to out her, but she grows angry when he says that she can make herself useful by making the coffee. He then retreats to the TARDIS, which is currently in the corner and being used by Rubish as a blackboard. At the castle of Sir Edward, the elderly lord and his wife Eleanor are discussing what to do about Irongron. Eleanor laments the fact that Irongron and his men do as they please unopposed, but Edward reveals that he doesn't currently have the manpower to take him on. However, he has written to the surrounding nobles in order to combine their forces against the warlord. Unfortunately, Edward's messenger is captured and brought to Irongron's castle, where he refuses to divulge the content of the letter to the illiterate warlord and his men. The messenger is sent to the cells, and later Lynx is summoned to help interrogate him. Lynx is invigorated when Irongron mentions his suspicions of a battle to come, revealing that the Sontaran Empire thrives on war. The messenger is brought back, and he uses his electronic baton to hypnotize him, which makes him reveal Sir Edward's plan. Lynx goes to leave and is stopped by Irongron, but again he uses his baton to disarm the warlord, who swears to make him pay once their alliance comes to an end. Back in the present day, Rubish informs the Doctor that he has also figured out Sarah Jane's secret and voices his suspicions about her being a spy. However, he stops when she returns and goes to his sleeping cubicle, leaving her and the Doctor alone. They continue to share their slightly antagonistic relationship when she questions him about a device he is working on, and he gives an evasive answer. She bids him goodnight and goes to her own cubicle. Rubish emerges and suggests telling the Brigadier, but the Doctor says that it can wait until morning. Later, the device the Doctor built starts to activate, and Sarah Jane comes out when she hears it. They hear a sound come from Rubish's cubicle and find it empty when they look inside, with the Doctor revealing that he was only there a few moments beforehand. The Doctor takes a scanner and goes to check the landing, and the scanner reveals a holographic version of Lynx, which a startled guard shoots at. The Brigadier arrives and the Doctor reveals Rubish's disappearance. He says he's gotten a fix on the person who took him, and reveals that they are using a matter transmitter to transport items through time and space. He says he intends to go into the TARDIS to find the source of the signal, and the Brigadier cautions him, reminding him of his adventure to Metebelis 3. Unbeknownst to them both, Sarah Jane has also entered the TARDIS, thinking that Rubish wandered in there. Once the TARDIS lands, she emerges a short while after the Doctor, and is amazed to see that it is still a police box despite the difference in its internal structure. She takes a look around the surrounding area and comes across a man preparing to fire an arrow at Irongron as he walks his castle's battlements. Her distraction causes him to miss, and Bloodaxe calls out to the guards, who immediately capture Sarah Jane, who mistakenly believes that they are part of some Renaissance fair. Her abduction is noticed by the Doctor, and he follows after her as she struggles against the guards, bringing her into the castle. He takes cover behind a wagon when he hears someone coming, and he spots Lynx emerge from the armory. He watches in surprise as the Sontaran, thinking he is unobserved, takes off his helmet to reveal a brown, bulbous necklace head. Part 2. Lynx puts back on his helmet when he hears footsteps approaching, and the Doctor is forced to hide when the guards bring in the would-be assassin, who is known as Hal the Archer. Meanwhile, Bloodaxe brings Sarah Jane to Irongron and demands to be let go, still thinking the entire thing is part of a pageant. Hal is brought in and under threat of death reveals that it was Lady Eleanor who sent him. Hal is then sent to the dungeon, and Sarah Jane interrupts Irongron and Bloodaxe's planning of their assault on Sir Edward's castle, demanding to know where she is. They think she is crazy as she tries to work out exactly what is going on, finally deciding that it is a tourist reenactment site of some type. Irongron tells her to shut up as her continued talking annoys him, but they are interrupted by the arrival of Lynx, who has come to show Irongron a weapon he has designed. Lynx notices Sarah Jane and is confused by the fact that she seems to be different to Irongron, but realizes that she is female. He notices her clothes and then hypnotizes her so that she can reveal when and where she came from. He grows alarmed at the idea of the Doctor's ability to travel in time, but Irongron interrupts his musings and demands to know more about the weapon Lynx has brought him. Lynx takes out a remote control and summons a mobile suit of armor. Irongron is amazed at the creation and asks for more to be built. Lynx agrees out of sheer amusement at the destruction they will cause, but then notices that Sarah Jane has gone missing. Irongron tells him not to worry, as his men will capture her, and he demands a full demonstration of the robotic warrior's capabilities. The Doctor encounters Sarah Jane in the corridors, but she runs from him. Before he can go after her, he is forced to take cover as Hal is carried outside for execution. However, the execution is stopped by Irongron, who has decided to test the robot by making it fight Hal. Despite Bloodaxe's worries that Hal's arrows will easily pierce the armor at such close range, he and the other men begin to laugh as Hal panics as he struggles to stop the robot. The Doctor observes this, and just as the robot is about to kill Hal, he takes a nearby crossbow and shoots the remote control from Irongron's hand. The robot begins to swing its blade wildly in Irongron's direction, and Hal uses the distraction as a chance to slip away. Sarah Jane spots him and calls him into a doorway she is hiding in, and together they flee from the castle. Irongron is forced to behead the robot, which finally causes it to fall to the ground, where it continues to trash around dangerously. He goes to the armory and is shocked when he sees Lynx's uncovered face after he bursts in. He tells him about the robot, and Lynx says that he will build him one more that responds to voice commands, and goes with Irongron to deactivate the other robot. Unbeknownst to them, their conversation is being monitored by the Doctor through a grate near the ceiling. After they have gone, he pulls open the grating and goes into the armory and is amazed at the sight of the missing scientists working like mindless automatons. He encounters Rubish, who seems to be free of Lynx's control due to the fact that he left his glasses behind in the present and is nearly blind without them. He tells Rubish where they are and says that they need to leave, but the scientist is intrigued by the idea of having travelled in time as well as the work that Lynx is doing. The Doctor tries in vain to get him to go with him, but Lynx returns and apprehends the Doctor. Meanwhile, Hal has taken Sarah Jane back to Sir Edward's castle and reveals what he has observed in Irongron's castle. However, Sarah Jane mistakenly voices her opinion that the Doctor is the one who is helping Irongron, explaining the abduction of the scientists to Irongron's castle. She urges him to do something to deal with the Doctor, and Sir Edward, impressed by her determination as well as Hal's own assessment of her bravery, asks what she has in mind. She suggests a commando raid against the castle to kidnap the Doctor, and Hal goes to organise the men for it. Back at the armory, the Doctor wakes up after having been knocked out by Lynx's baton and recognizes him as the Sontaran. He asks if their age-old war with the Routons has now spread to Earth, and Lynx says he was forced to make an emergency landing after being attacked by a Routon fighter squadron. The Doctor reveals that he is a Time Lord and warns Lynx not to be so dismissive of him or his people after Lynx voices the Sontaran opinion of the Doctor's people. He then offers to help Lynx fix his ship if he frees the scientists and sends them back to their own time. Lynx refuses, not caring over the fact that he is potentially altering human history, and orders the Doctor to put on a controlled headset, which shocks the Doctor when his concentration deviates from the questions it poses. Lynx leaves, and the Doctor tries several times to take off the headset, but is shocked each time he does so. Outside, Sarah Jane and Hal lead the raid on the castle. Hal suggests that she waits behind, but she reminds him that she is the only one who knows what the Doctor looks like. They pass by the Great Hall, where they see Lynx give Irongron another batch of rifles, and overhear the Warlord order preparations for an attack on Sir Edward's castle the following day. In the armory, Rubish returns, and the Doctor guides him to the control panel for the headset and sets him free. He prepares to leave, but when Rubish calls him by his alias of John Smith, he remembers Sarah Jane and goes to look for her. He encounters Bloodaxe and some guards in the hallway and flees outside, where he does his best to avoid the rest of the men, but falls to the ground and watches as Irongron prepares to kill him. Part 3. Hal, who is on the battlements with Sarah Jane, manages to disarm Irongron with a well-placed shot, and the Doctor rushes towards them. He blocks off his pursuit by lighting a pile of straw on fire, and he thanks Sarah Jane and Hal for their rescue. However, she tells the others to apprehend him, and they make their way back to Sir Edward's castle. Lynx returns to the armory to find the Doctor gone, and leaves again to find him, unaware that he is being watched by Rubish. After he leaves, Rubish goes back to work on fashioning a monocle for himself so he can see better. Lynx goes to the Great Hall, where Irongron vows revenge against the Doctor. Lynx demands a search party to be sent out for the missing Doctor, but Irongron, thinking Lynx's description of him as a mere slave, refuses to listen. Bloodaxe realizes who the Doctor is, as he overheard Sarah Jane calling to him, and informs Irongron that he and Lynx are looking for the same man. Meanwhile, Sarah Jane's party arrives back at Sir Edward's castle, and she begins to question the Doctor about his allegiance with Irongron. The Doctor clears up the confusion by informing her about Lynx. She is skeptical over his claims that Lynx is an alien, but is intrigued when he reveals his association with UNIT and his help in investigating the disappearances of the scientists. Sir Edward and Lady Eleanor arrive and are taken aback by his charming demeanour. Sarah Jane admits that she may have been wrong about him, but they all remain skeptical as they think he could just be trying to save himself. Hal informs Sir Edward that Irongron will attack in the morning, and the Doctor says that he will help defend the castle. He gives instructions for Lady Eleanor to organise the serving women to make mannequins, whilst he works on mixing various compounds together. Sarah Jane joins him, and despite being annoyed at his slightly patronising attitude, she seems intrigued by him and the TARDIS. She asks why he doesn't just leave, and he says he needs to stay to stop Lynx from changing humanity's history, revealing his own nature as a Time Lord. She's amazed by this, but before they can talk further, they hear battle horns from Irongron's party. At the castle walls, Irongron and Bloodaxe are amazed to see the walls fully manned. Irongron prepares to call for a retreat, but Lynx, wanting to see how war on Earth is fought, insists that he attack using the rifles he gave them. When Irongron and his men miss, Lynx takes a rifle to show him how it is done, and he hits one of the figures on the wall, revealing it to be a mannequin. Realizing that he actually does have the advantage in numbers after all, Irongron orders his men to set up the ladders to climb the walls. As they attack, the Doctor and Sarah Jane start throwing bags of the mixtures he was creating, which turn out to be rudimentary smoke and stink bombs. The attack is driven off, and Irongron orders a return to his castle, where he berates his own men. Bloodaxe tries to intercede on their behalf, but Irongron tells them to leave and prepare for another attack tomorrow. Lynx comments that Irongron led the retreat, and he says that humans are weak. Irongron grows frustrated and attacks him, but the Sontaran easily beats him and says that he will soon be finished with his work and he can leave. After he's gone, Irongron rants and swears to kill Lynx, and Bloodaxe asks why he didn't do it already. Sensing doubt from his subordinate, Irongron says that he needs to keep Lynx alive so that he can get everything from him that he can, and then he will kill him. At Sir Edward's castle, the Doctor and the others are having a celebratory dinner, but he warns them that Irongron will attack again and won't fall for the same trick twice. Instead, he suggests that they capture Irongron's castle and asks Lady Eleanor to find ingredients to help brew a sleeping potion. Later, he and Sarah Jane, disguised as monks seeking donations, gain admittance to the castle and make their way into the armory. Inside, they encounter Rubish, who says that Lynx has been working the enslaved scientists nearly to death. Sarah Jane says they need to get them food, but the doctor says that Lynx has nearly finished repairing his spaceship. He says that they need to stop it because when it takes off, it will destroy the entire castle. In the Great Hall, Lynx delivers another batch of guns to Irongron and says that he will try and finish the new robot before he leaves. When Irongron demands his obedience in exchange for having his men take the finished ship out of the castle, Lynx tells them that he does not need them and again warns them about trying to stop him. In the armory, the Doctor uses a penlight to try and break the control of the scientists through a sequence of flashes, but he, Sarah Jane, and Rubish are forced to hide when Lynx returns. Lynx tries to force some of the fatigued scientists back to their feet, but the Doctor stops him. He offers to help Lynx repair his ship. In exchange, he allows the Doctor to send the scientists back to their own time. He also asks that he help capture Irongron and his men so they can be taken out of the castle when it and the weapons are destroyed as a result of the ship taking off. In reply, Lynx shoots him with his baton. Part 4. Sarah Jane rushes out and struggles with Lynx for control of the baton, and the Doctor collapses. The Doctor weakly tells Lynx that the scientists are on the point of exhaustion, but the Sontaran says that he doesn't care so long as they finish their work and allow him to rejoin the war against the Routons. He voices his derision over the Doctor's weak nature, but as he is talking, the Doctor notices Rubish sneaking up on Lynx. The Doctor then says that all species have a weakness, mentioning that Sontarans can be stunned by a blow to the probic vent at the base of their necks. Rubish catches on and hits Lynx with a piece of staff, causing him to fall to the ground in pain. Sarah Jane goes to check on the Doctor and he thanks her for saving him. He then says they need to carry out their plan, and Sarah Jane leaves to carry out her part whilst Rubish and the Doctor tie up Lynx. Just as they finish tying him up, Bloodaxe arrives to bring him to Irongron. The Doctor impersonates Lynx and tells him to leave, but Bloodaxe says that if he doesn't come soon, they will come back and drag him to Irongron. The Doctor then instructs Rubish on how to break the control over the scientists, whilst he tries to come up with a way to distract Irongron. Meanwhile, Sarah Jane makes her way to the kitchen and starts to unpack the drug food, but she is caught by one of Irongron's servants. She initially tries to pass herself off as a noble, but the servant sees through her disguise and instead says that she is starving and just wants food. The servant agrees to feed her, but she would have to work for it. In the Great Hall, Irongron and the rest of his men watch as the robot enters. Unbeknownst to them, it is actually the Doctor wearing the full suit of armour that housed the robot. Irongron demands to know where Lynx is, and the Doctor says that he is still in the armory, making more robots. He tries to leave, but Irongron, curious as to his combat skills, challenges him to a fight. Despite the Doctor's repeated attempts to avoid the fight, Irongron attacks him and the two engage in a sword fight. They are evenly matched, and Irongron tells Bloodaxe to join so they can test him further. His pride wounded at the Doctor's continual display of superior skill, Irongron orders his men to shoot their crossbows at him in an effort to limit his skill. The Doctor reveals his true nature, and Irongron orders him to be captured. Irongron prepares to kill him, but then decides that since he thinks the Doctor to be a sorcerer, he will kill him with sorcery. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Sarah Jane is working on the stew and finds out what food is to be served to Irongron and his men. She then voices her annoyance that only the women in the castle do any of their work, but her feminist ideologies are ignored by the servant and the others. After the servant leaves, Sarah Jane surreptitiously drugs the food. In the armory, Rubish manages to bring around the last of the scientists and explains the situation to them. He tells them that they will need to keep up the pretense, and they hurry back to their tasks when they hear Irongron approaching. The warlord finds Lynx tied up and frees him, and tells him that he intends to kill the Doctor by having his men use him as target practice for their rifle skills. The Doctor repeatedly manages to dodge the incoming bullets, much to the amusement of Irongron and Bloodaxe. Suddenly, Sarah Jane, having slipped out of the kitchen when she heard the gunfire, appears in the gallery above the hall and pushes one of the chandeliers towards the Doctor. He grabs hold of it, and its swinging momentum carries him across the room and out the doorway, which he then bars shut. He then reunites with Sarah Jane and they flee from the castle, knocking out the guards as they do so. Back at Sir Edward's castle, the Doctor says that he will give some time for the sleeping potion to take effect before returning. Sarah Jane tries to dissuade him, but he says he needs to rescue the scientists so that they aren't killed when Lynx's ship takes off. Sarah Jane and Hal offer to go back with him, and he thanks them for their assistance. Later, they make their way to Irongron's castle, but they stop at the TARDIS first, where the Doctor collects a circular metal folding fan. They arrive at the castle to find the guards asleep from the effects of the drug food. They make their way to the armory, where Rubish tells him that Lynx has finished repairing his ship and it is currently powering up. The Doctor tells Hal to scout the castle to make sure Irongron and the rest of his men are asleep so they can be disarmed. The Doctor then goes to the ship to find a device that he can send the scientists back to their own time, and once he has it, he begins sending them back. Lynx arrive, and the Doctor hands the device to Rubish so he can take over. Lynx tries to use his baton on him, but the folding fan deflects the beam. Lynx charges at the Doctor, and they manage to disarm each other before engaging in hand-to-hand combat. The Sontaran's superior strength proves to be too much for the Doctor, and he throws him to the ground. He picks up his baton and prepares to kill the Doctor, but is interrupted by the appearance of Irongron, who has managed to resist the sleeping potion. He tries to attack Lynx, but Lynx kills him instead. He then goes into his ship to prepare for takeoff. Meanwhile, Hal rouses the Blood Axe and tells him to get his men out of the castle before racing back to the armory. He arrives back just as the ship's door begins to close, and he shoots an arrow into Lynx's probic vent. The dying Sontaran manages to activate the takeoff switch, and the Doctor rushes Sarah Jane, who helped get the rest of the scientists home, and Hal out of the castle. They manage to get out of it moments before it explodes. Hal escorts them back to the TARDIS and thanks them for their help, praising the Doctor for his magical prowess. The Doctor tells him that he is not a magician before entering the TARDIS with Sarah Jane, and the Archer watches in amazement as it vanishes from sight. End of the story. So, first story of season 11 down, so we're now going to go to the trivia spot. What do you got for us this week, Trish?
So, the air date for The Time Warrior, the first story of season 11, is the 15th of December 1973 to the 5th of January 1974. The writer of this story is Robert Holmes. Hello again, Bob. How are you doing?
Hi, Bob.
This is story 6 of 18 for Bob Holmes. We previously saw his work in The Crotons, The Space Pirates, Spearhead from Space, Terror of the Autons, and Carnival of Monsters. The director of the story is Alan Bromley. This is the first of 2 directing credits for Alan. We'll see his work again in The Nightmare of Eden. Alan passed away back in 1995. Now, the working titles for the story included The Fugitive, The Time Fugitive, and The Time Survivor. I think Time Fugitive and Time Survivor present 2 very different stories.
they really do. And given Lynx's portrayal, I think Time Warrior is obviously the better, more apt.
Yeah, it's a more appropriate story. Description.
It is.
So the whole how to put it, the setting for this story, the idea of a medieval castle setting, that was actually a writing story task that was given to Bob Holmes by Terrance Dicks, and Holmes was less than enthusiastic about it. He didn't really like historical stories. He thought they were a bit boring. The words here are twee and whimsical, and they were kind of relics of the show's original educational mission. Now, I personally disagree with you, Bob, but whatever.
Yes, absolutely.
However, he agreed to Terrance's suggestion of a medieval times story, provided he wouldn't have to have historical personages in it, and that it would include a strong science fiction element, which is where his strengths lie.
Yeah.
When Bob later became the script editor, and Terrance was a writer, Bob kind of flipped it on Terrance and gave him a setting of a lighthouse. Go write a fucking story to Lifehouse, you little shit. You made me write one in a medieval castle.
And from what I remember of my initial watch through, Terrance rose to the occasion.
Speaking of Bob and Terrance, so Bob's only memory of the shoot was apparently that Terrance ate kippers with vinegar on the train to the filming location. And that sounds rank. That sounds absolutely disgusting.
It really does.
I imagine it would smell.
Like, and a confined thing like a fucking train as well, like, ugh.
No. Terrance, what are you doing? So, this is another contribution from Bob and the fact that we have another, key part of Doctor Who lore in the Sontarans. Okay, so a new quote-unquote monster that we have. So the idea for the Sontarans came after Bob read a 10-volume treatise on military strategy called On War, which was written by an early 19th century Prussian general. And to offset his... this is a quote from the TARDIS Wiki, it's so funny the way they wrote it. To offset his ennui with the actual business of writing a storyline, Bob prepared his story submission in the form of a military communique between the
Right.
Sontarans Holmes and Terran Siddix.
For fuck's sake.
Which I just think is fantastic. Like, Bob Holmes is the guy who want to sit down and have a chat with.
Yeah.
He's so good.
Yeah.
So one thing you may have noticed is that the credits have once again changed. So the
Yes.
opening sequence is a bit different. So it has this kind of like time tunnel effect and also the diamond shaped logo.
Yeah.
These will both remain in use until 1980. Paddy got it right in his summary. We are on to parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, no longer episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mentioned this last week. And this will remain the case until the end of the classic series, with the exception of Destiny of the Daleks.
Just on the subject of the time tunnel logo, that was actually used in a Family Guy parody of Star Wars, where it's like they go into hyperspace and it's just the Tom Baker version of this intro.
I think most people probably associate it with Tom, but it did actually start with John.
Yeah.
So, interestingly, the Radio Times program listing for part 1 had a black and white illustration by a guy named Peter Brooks, which had links using his gun to shoot an axe from a hand, which is sort of in line with what we see him doing in the show. And then it also had the Brigadier, Sarah Jane, and the Doctor in front of Iron Grand's castle, which is a bit weird because the Brigadier didn't go back in time. And he's only in episode 1.
Yeah, just
part 1. Sorry.
Yeah, like it's no. While it would have been cool to see the Brig back in that time period, I think just having the Doctor and Sarah Jane be the only two of the unit group to be involved in the adventure is probably the best thing for a new incoming companion.
Yeah, it's just weird that they would put the illustration out as if he was going back in time, but he didn't.
Yeah.
It seems a bit misleading. So the name Irongron came from Denmark. It's a historical name coming out of Denmark. Barry Letts wanted Bob Hoskins to play Irongron. I don't know what Bob Hoskins was doing around 1973. But he wanted Bob Hoskins. He was unavailable, but did recommend David Dacre, who would later obviously play the role. This is the first mention of the planet that has now been called Gallifrey. So Paddy always refers to it as the planet soon to be called, or not as of yet called, Gallifrey. It has now been called Gallifrey, Paddy. You can call it Gallifrey from now on. Originally, it was referred to as Galfrey, Galfrey, in the scripts. And then the extra L and I came from somewhere. I think Gallifrey sounds better than Galfrey, only because it sounds like a girl fight if you say it the other way. So a couple of things in terms of the timing of this story in the sort of in-universe timeline. So we find out in Death of the Doctor, the Sarah Jane Adventures story, that Sarah Jane told Jo she arrived just after Joe's departure from units. This will be fairly close to the Green Death in terms of timeline. And also, there could have been a way to completely avoid the unit dating controversy, because there was a line in the bit where Lynx hypnotizes and interrogates Sarah Jane. There was originally a line that had her specify that she came from 1974, which, if you jump ahead to another story we'll be doing in a couple of seasons, Periods of Mars, where she says she's from 1980, had they gone with the 1974 line, it would have undone all the confusion that line later caused. So, a bit short-sighted to not include it, but what you gonna do?
To be fair though, if they had included it, who's to say that in Pyramids of Mars they still would have said that she was from 1980?
Well, no, I mean, I still think the line in Periods of Mars makes sense, because, like, you know, she's from 1980-ish, like around that general time frame. She wasn't from the year 1980, so 1980-ish. It's fine. Also, she's no clue how long she's been. Like, from her perspective, she may be like, well, I've been traveling with you from my perspective for like 5 years. So, you know, +1, carry the 2, 1980, there we go. Originally, the script contained a full-scale battle with knights in armor attacking the castle. they didn't have the budget, so they went with smoke bombs instead. Which I just think is like the ultimate Doctor Who budget workaround. It's like,
It is.
we don't have the budget for these great nights. Can we do it with action figures? No. We don't have enough action figures. Can we make orange smoke? Yeah, that we can do. Okay, let's do that. So, also in the original script, it was the Doctor who killed Lynx by shooting an arrow into the probic vent, not Hal. So, I think when I first watched this story 10 plus years ago,
yeah,
I would have been surprised if the Doctor had been the one to do it, particularly this Doctor. But after the stories we've seen already,
yeah.
Now this is a Sontaran, not an Ogron, so maybe the Doctor has a different, has more reticence in killing a Sontaran.
Yeah.
But yeah, so originally it was meant to be the Doctor who's doing it.
I have comments about that resolution that kind of plays into actually the three people involved in that: the Doctor, Hal, and Lynx. So we can discuss that a small bit more. Also, just when you're on about they couldn't afford, the big battle, it reminds me of the end of the Holy Grail, where like apparently they just ran out of budget, so they couldn't shoot the battle scene. They just had the cops show up and arrest King Arthur and Sir Bedivere.
That's one of the best like closings ever. It's so good. So Barry had originally hoped to direct the serial himself, but he and Terrence Dicks were gearing up for production on Moonbase 3, and so he was busy. Lynx's appearance, right? The first sight of a Sontaran. This was a collaboration between the costume designer James Atchison and the makeup designer Sandra Exelby, and they worked from Bob's scripted description of Lynx as a cross between a human and a toad. Apparently, you take a human and a toad, and you get a big potato.
Yeah, and I have to say, I had really enjoyed the prosthetic for Lynx, because it's blended in so seamlessly to his own features, like that when his mouth talks and his eyes close, it's not like he's wearing an actual mask,
Yeah, I forgot. It's been a while since I've watched this story. I particularly haven't watched it since we started doing the podcast. I was trying to hold off on watching episodes where we're doing the podcast. I forgot how much his own mouth was part of it. Like how much freedom he had to actually just speak normally. Because sometimes with the full face prosthetics, the mouth doesn't really move, and you can kind of see their own mouth moving behind the fake one. So it's great that it was like the costume designer and makeup designer sort of working together on this.
Yeah, no, kudos to the guys. I think they really pulled it off for Lynx.
Yeah, however, Kevin Lindsay, who was the guy in the suit, found it very difficult to wear. It interfered with his breathing. And at one point, he did collapse under the weight of the mask and the helmet. Now, it was later revealed that Kevin had a heart condition. And when we talk about the Sontaran experiment, we'll be mentioning this in more detail, but he suffered a lot to play Lynx and later to play Star in the Sontaran experiment. Lastly, originally there was an introductory scene for Hal that featured him flirting with a serving girl named Mary. And he explained that he had accompanied Sir Edward on one of the Crusades and helped him home after he fell sick in the Holy Land. Because it's kind of weird that Hal, this like ace archer, isn't on the Crusades. Because you imagine he would be. But this would kind of explain that he did go, but he brought Sir Edward home.
Yeah.
Which is why he was in England at the time.
Just when you're saying about flirting with a serving girl, now I know that obviously he didn't shoot this sequence, but you know the way that Jeremy was the original Boba Fett? You know, in the special edition of Return of the Jedi, it has Boba Fett like flirting with the two dancers in Jabba's palace. I just imagined that, but how? That's what I have in my head now.
I think it works.
Yeah, I think it works. Just like like the cock of the chin, and like as he walks off.
How you do?
Yeah.
So on to our cast. So as Rubish, we have Donald Palmer. This is Donald's only Doctor Who acting credit. His non-Who credits include Gamble for a Throne, Ransom for a Pretty Girl, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Special Branch, UFO, The Day of the Triffids, Yes Minister, Agatha Christie's Poirot, and Little Britain. Hal is played by the aforementioned Jeremy Bulloch. This is the second and final Doctor Who acting appearance for Jeremy. We previously saw his work in the Space Museum where he played Tor. There were talks about keeping Hal on as a second companion. So it'd be Sarah Jane and Hal. And apparently Barry did approach Jeremy Bulloch to inquire about his schedule, but nothing ever came of it. Now, when we talked about the Space Museum, you and I commented on how some people had said that Jeremy Bulloch had passed away, and at the time he hadn't. Sadly, he has, since we recorded that episode, Jeremy passed away in December of 2020.
Which is, obviously, look, it's a shame that anyone passes away, but I've often said it to people that Jeremy Bulloch is quite possibly the nicest celebrity I've ever met. When we met him at the Star Wars convention here in Cork, he was just so nice.
He was really nice. I think it was actually Jeremy who told us that Hal, there was a talk of Hal being kept on.
It was because, God love him, he I think he smelt a potential.
He was trying to upsell his second.
Yeah, I think he he was like, oh, like, here's a pigeon for me, because you like were kind of like, squeeing over both like a picture of Boba Fett or a picture of him as Hal the Archer, and he was like, well, why not get both?
Yeah, I do regret my choice because I went with Boba Fett, and now I really wish I'd gone with Hal, because actually, like, completely off topic, but during the what I would call the convention off season of 2020 and 2021, a number of convention sites were selling like autographs that they had like in their collections and stuff, and the autographs of Hal the Archer are very rare. Mostly Jeremy was signing Boba Fett, and just to give you an idea, this isn't the exact figure, but just to give you an idea, if an autograph of Jeremy as Boba Fett was €50, literally the same autograph, the same number of words as Hal is €100, because there's so few of them. Because like, if you imagine, like, on his table he had like 7 different pictures of Boba Fett and one picture of Hal the Archer. So I am kind of regretting my choice, if I'm honest.
We live and we learn.
Yeah. Moving on. I got sidetracked by Jeremy Bulloch. Iron Gron is played by David Dacre, as I mentioned. This is the first of 2 acting credits for David. We will see him again in Nightmare of Eden, so clearly he was brought back by the director. He also did some voice work for Big Finish, so kept kind of the Doctor Who sphere for a little bit. David's non-Who work includes Z-Cars, Boone, Time Bandits, Two People, Aces High, Dick Turpin, and Crown Prosecutor.
And as one of my personal favourite appearances of him was in the show Porridge, the one with Ronnie Barker set in the prison. He actually appears in the season finale as like a prisoner that nearly stops Godber, Ronnie Barker's prison mate, from getting out because he says some inappropriate things about Ronnie Barker's daughter, at which point Godber like decides to defend her honor because he's secretly going out with her. And it's a great performance by him there, and it's slightly Iron Gron-esque, so we'll see how it goes into our discussion.
As links, we have, again, as previously mentioned, Kevin Lindsay. This is the first of 3 Doctor Who stories for Kevin. We will see him again in Planet of the Spiders, and as I mentioned, in the Santaran Experiment. His non-Who work includes War and Peace, Paul Temple, Coronation Street, Z-Cars, and Crossroads. Now, I'd like to point out that this story came out in 1973-74. Planet of the Spiders is the last story of this season, and the Santaran Experiment is the 3rd story of next season.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3rd story. Kevin passed away in 1975. So, very short tenure on Who, but definitely, I think, a good one.
Yes, definitely.
And then we're on to the woman herself. So, I had to stop myself from writing an essay basically recounting her entire autobiography, which is currently looking at me from across the table. But
I was going to say, yeah, pace yourself on this one, okay?
Sarah Jane Smith is played by Elizabeth Sladen. Now, Liz was from Liverpool. She got into performing arts at a young age. She started with dance before moving to acting, and after finishing grammar school, she attended drama school for 2 years. She began work at the Liverpool Playhouse Rep Company as an assistant stage manager, and her first appearance was as a corpse, which is a great way to get into acting as a corpse. She was scolded for giggling on stage, though, because there was a young actor by the name of Brian Miller who whispered the words "Respiration Nil, Aston Villa 2" in her ear while he was playing a doctor on stage. Liz would later go on to marry said Brian Miller and have a lovely daughter named Sadie.
Yeah.
Apparently, Liz was so good as assistant stage manager, she didn't really get many acting roles because she was so good at this other job. So she started deliberately fucking up so they'd give out to her and give her more on stage time than like backstage time, which I think is hilarious. She eventually moved into weekly rep, touring around England along with Brian, and then moved to Manchester for 3 years, where her most notable role at that time was playing Desdemona in Othello. She also did parts for Leeds Radio and Granada Television, appearing in 1970 in 6 episodes of Coronation Street. In 1972, she and Brian moved to London, where she did some more work in television. Her first role was as a female terrorist in an episode of Doom Watch, which I now really want to watch.
Yeah.
This followed by guest roles in Some Mothers Do Have 'Em and Z-Cars.
I've seen the Some Others Do Have 'Em guest star, all right.
Yeah, I've seen bits of the. I've seen because she's done a few Z-Cars. I've seen clips from one of them. It's a very different Liz, very different Liz Layton to the one we're used to.
It's hugely different.
So Z-Cars is actually kind of what led Liz to Doctor Who. So after Katie Manning left, Barry Letts was getting increasingly desperate in search of a replacement for her. And he had a friend, Ron Caddock, who was a producer on Z-Cars, who gave Liz this massive enthusiastic recommendation. Now, apparently there's a funny story that's in Liz's book, and also she's told it a number of times, where she was off doing some work, she came home, went to bed, and the following morning there was like a note by the phone saying like, oh, you're expected at an audition today. And apparently Brian's like, oh yeah, no, someone called last night and he like forgot to tell her or something. That audition was for Doctor Who. She didn't know it was for the companion role. She just thought it was for like a bit part, which is kind of what she'd been doing a lot of. And so she was really amazed at like Barry's thoroughness at like interviewing someone for this like bit part in a story. And the way the story is told by Liz and Barry and other people who were there is that Barry really liked her, and so brought her to meet John. And so he took her into the rehearsal room, and John was there, and he apparently like had all these buttons on his coat, like very like 1970s. And so Barry introduced them, and the way Liz described it was Barry kind of stood back behind her a little bit and sort of like a thumbs up, being like, you know, I like her, what do you think? And then he walked in front of her, and John walked behind her and went thumbs up, yeah, I like her too. And apparently that's how it was agreed that she would have the role. Liz will go on to appear in 18 stories in her original run on the show, appearing with John Pertwee and Tom Baker. She would return to the main show several times after that, though, while also starring in a one-off spin-off pilot, one made-for-TV movie, and her own CBBC spin-off, The Sarah Jane Adventures. On top of all that, she also did a number of audio stories, both through the BBC, and she had her own Big Finish series as well. Elizabeth passed away on Tuesday, the 19th of April, 2011, from cancer.
I suppose that is a very downer note, and I still remember the day that you messaged me about that. But with the 18 stories that she's done, like, she's probably one of the longest serving companions, like next to Fraser Hines, I think Janet Fielding is another one, and then like, there's obviously the whole thing of longest serving companions, because now you have with the revival era, it's while there's a certain same amount of stories, it's less episodes,
Yeah.
and then obviously there's the number of years on the show, so
Yeah.
it's. But no, she's definitely like she and Fraser Hines, and I think Janet Fielding are probably the longest serving from the classic era.
Yeah, because like Liz has nearly 4 seasons. I think there's what is there one story from season 14 she's not in? Is Deadly Assassin the last story of season 14?
Yes.
Yeah, so she's in practically 4 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
bar one story, which for any companion from a Doctor Who perspective is a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how long Janet was on. I haven't watched a lot of
This,
Janet stuff.
Janet was there for around 3 years, I think 3.5 years, but I think she had a similar amount of stories. So that's where it kind of comes into it.
Yeah.
Um,
Of course, you then have to include the 5 Doctors, which Liz is also in, so that takes up to 19 stories, and then of course she has all of the other plethora of stuff, which we'll get to in time as we're talking about stuff.
so actually, my apologies. Season 14, it's sort of a William Hartnell type thing, where the first 2 stories of season 14 she's in. The rest of it are all there's Deadly Assassin, which is no companion, and then there's Louise Jameson comes in The Face of Evil, which is halfway through that season.
Okay, so she's in 3.5. Okay, I
Yeah,
don't know why I thought that season 14 was.
it's the same kind of thing with the William Hartnell thing, because like the Smugglers and 10th Planet are technically season 4.
Yeah,
but you kind of it's like, oh no, that's the end of the Hartnell era, now it's the start of the Troughton era, which you would think would be a brand new season, but no.
yeah, no. But yeah, and actually, at the time we're recording this on the 2nd of February, and it was Liz Sladen's birthday yesterday, which was very serendipitous because I watched The Time Warrior yesterday, and I sat down to watch it, going, "Oh, it's Liz Sladen's birthday," and now we're starting watching her stories, so I was very excited.
Yes. Aww.
Also, you mentioned that Jeremy Bulloch is one of the nicest actors you've met. Liz was so nice and so sweet, and it was such a pleasure that I got to meet her a couple of years ago. I say a couple of years ago, it would have been 12 years ago. Jesus Christ, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, because you met her before it was introduced to you, I think.
I don't think so. It would have been around that time, because it was before the wedding of Sarah Jane Smith. It was before season 3 of Sarah Jane Adventure started.
Right.
But I'm just looking at that she passed away in 2011, and it's currently 2022.
Yeah.
That's scary. We're getting old, Paddy.
No, we're not. Stop it.
And we've probably nattered on about trivia and random stories from our past long enough. So let's take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come back with the character discussion.
Doodly-doo, doodly-doo, doodly-doo. So, as always, next stop after the trivia spot is the character discussion. So we have the Doctor, we have the companions of Sarah Jane and Hal. Now, I initially put Rubish down as a prominent character. Do you think he should stay there, or should he be bumped up to companion status?
I think Rubish should stay as prominent character, and I'll explain more when we get to him.
Cool, perfect. And then, obviously, for the villains, there's Lynx and Iron Gran. So, I haven't watched this in a while, and I know that you haven't watched it. Well, actually, no, you probably... When was the last time you watched this?
Oh, I'll be honest, it's very hard for me to go back and watch the Sarah Jane stories, because even though I loved them, knowing Liz passed away, it's actually very difficult for me to watch them. So I think the last time I watched Time Warrior would have been, to put it in context, it would have been after I came back from skiing the last time, and before a certain someone... No, it would have been after a certain someone left my life. I'll put that way.
Yes, gotcha. Cool. Perfect.
I went through a bit of a thing where I went through all my Sarah Jane stories because I needed some happiness in my life. So yeah, that would have been coming up on 4 years ago.
Right. Cool. So you're now it's both fresh in our memories.
Mm.
So this is perfect. So do you want to start off, or will I start off?
Sure, I'll start off. Because I messaged you. You messaged me yesterday, so I was like, "Hey, you watch it tonight?" I said, "Yeah," and I said, "I'm gonna have to try and like," because you gave me the list of characters, and I was already writing notes in my brain for
Hmm.
those characters without having rewatched it yet. Um, and I was trying to remember before I watched it what my thoughts were of the Doctor in this one, and the only thing I remembered specifically was the Doctor sort of making the comment about we need someone to make the coffee.
Hmm.
And given sort of recent, realizations that several of the doctors in certain stories were presented as quite sexist,
Hmm.
I was like, oh no, please. Like, I couldn't remember much else of his like attitude for the story, and I was like, oh, please hope
Hmm.
that was only the one line, and it was. I am
Yeah.
going to take his comment on Sarah being the coffee lady or the tea lady purely as him having a little bit of fun with her because he just sits back and laughs and sort of smiles. Do you know?
Yeah.
I think he was clearly intrigued by her. Joe, this woman who came into this research center pretending to be her aunt and was kind of like, A, he can tell that he can wind her up a bit, but also he's like, I'm curious to see how this is going to go.
Yeah.
Like, when Rubish is like, oh, should we tell the Brigadier? And he's like, no, why bother?
I've actually just realized that this is going to be very interesting because whereas you would have watched this previously with like only watching Liz's stories and
Mm.
then the scattering of Joe, you've now seen the character arc of, his 3 seasons with Joe and now coming into Time Warrior.
Yeah, because
So getting
I would have watched him with Liz Shaw, skipped Joe,
yeah.
and then watched
Yeah.
him with Sarah Jane. So it's very weird for me watching it the whole way through. Um,
Yeah.
I think I said I loved his interaction with Sarah. I love that he didn't offer her up, do you know, and the fact that when Rubish is like, "Oh,
Mhm.
we should tell the Brigadier," he's like, "About what? What are you on about?" And he's so clearly like, "What the fuck is up with her?" Like, I
Yeah.
was gonna, he's supposed to sit back and like, he just wants to watch the world burn a little bit around the Brigadier, so see like, what is this young woman going to do? Um, During his time in the past, I love how he plays each moment as it comes. He never condemns Sarah for thinking that he was the bad guy.
Yeah.
Do you know, like he never is like, what do you mean by that? Like, of course, like, yeah, he says, no, like, of course I'm not, but like, he never sort of, to put it in context, right? I can't help but compare this to Terror of the Autons, right? We
Hmm.
have an introductory companion story. The Doctor is still there, it's the same Doctor. It's the first story of the season. And we talked about in our rambling last week how Terror was really a bad introduction for a character. And the way the
Yeah.
Doctor treated her was part of
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Here, yeah, he has fun with her, but and she calls him out for being demeaning, but it's purely meant in jest. Like he never gets angry with her.
Hmm.
Like, he could very easily have yelled at her for being like, "What the hell are you doing around telling people I'm this evil person?" And I'm not. But he doesn't, and I think it just comes across a whole lot better in this story than it did in Terror of the Autons. Also,
Hmm.
I love his use of quote unquote magic. It's just stink bombs.
Yeah.
Stink bombs and flash grenades, that's it. But also, again, his compassion coming through in that, he was perfectly willing to help Lynx. Look, send them all home. I'll fix your fucking ship. That's no
Hmm.
problem. Like, he had nothing against Lynx being a guy who was stranded on Earth. That wasn't the problem. He's just
Hmm.
like, don't hurt people, and don't dilute the timeline. Like that's it. Or don't pollute the timeline rather. That's all he wanted. And he would have happily helped him. He offered it to him twice. He would have happily helped him do that. But we also see the compassion in that like he doesn't want Iron Gron and his men being blown up, even though
Hmm.
they're bad guys. And that's
Yeah.
that's the Doctor that I like. Do you know that? That's the Doctor that we saw in um the Silurians. Do you know?
Yes.
So I really like that it's coming back up to the fore here because there was some stories over the last like 3 seasons with Joe, and like this obviously isn't just slant on Joe or anything, but there's some story in those seasons where like his moral compass was a little funny.
Yes. No, I'd agree.
Sea Devils, looking at you.
Hmm.
Whereas here we get to very clearly see where that moral compass is pointing, which is good.
Hmm.
How about you?
So like one of my initial thoughts was like I would be very curious to know how much time has passed since Joe left because you know, he doesn't mention her, like, or he doesn't, like, pass a comment about, oh, Joe would have loved this or something
Mm.
like that. So I was just curious about that. Um, John's performance here, okay. I have a feeling that there's maybe like some real life feelings done into it, because his interactions with Sarah when they first meet, it does feel like a small bit like they're doing lines for an audition.
Mm.
Like he seems like, because he's almost like he's appraising her. Well, he is appraising her, but it's almost like it's. I can imagine that this is sort of what it was like when they rehearsed that scene together.
Yeah.
Um, but it just actually adds to the performance.
Mm.
Like I think, like, if that was the case where he did have real life feelings about working with Liz and his time on the show, I think it actually adds to the whole character point of view, because it's like he's just after losing someone that he cared an awful lot about. Now that he has like full access to the TARDIS, maybe it's time for him to start going wandering again. Maybe not be so beholden to Unit. Um, Now that's probably just me using my knowledge of like what's about to
Mm.
happen. And again, his tenure on the show, maybe it's tilting or tinting my view a small bit. But I liked it. I really enjoyed
Mm.
it.
One
We
thing
got her
on
you,
that
yeah.
as well is that in terms of like the real life bleeding in, there's a
Mm-hmm.
3 month gap between this story and the next story in reality, in production. Meaning,
Yeah.
I think this is one of those cases where this story was actually filmed at the end of last season.
Right.
So Katie may have actually only just left,
Gotcha.
and then they're into this new story.
But like, aside from that, we get our usual like shenanigans from him. Like, it's nice seeing him build his little time detection device. I love this.
Kind of reminds me of Tennant's like it goes ding when there's stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Um, it was actually because I recently watched it. When he has the holographic projector and it shows legs and the guard shoots,
Mm.
and he just gives the guard this look of like, "What the fuck are you doing?" It reminds me of Age of Ultron, where like the Avengers are fighting the Ultron bots, and like all the Sokovian cops are shooting, and one of them tells like stop, but like one guy, he's clearly nervous, shoots, and Quicksilver gets hit by the bullet while he's running really fast, and he just looks back to him and kind of go like, "What the fuck?" um, like I enjoyed that. I enjoyed his interaction with Rubish. I actually know I thought he was great here. He was his usual charming self. We got Science Doctor. We got John being in his best James Bond. And one thing that I really enjoyed was that we rarely see him get physically bested
Mm.
when he does his Venusian Aikido. He gets thrown around the place here. Like, he's clearly not a match for Lynx. And I thought it really set up that if one Santaran is this strong,
Yeah.
essentially, what must an entire army of them be like?
Yeah, and that's something that like jumping timelines massively. The Sarah Jane
Mm-hmm.
Adventures has a Santaran story in it.
Yeah.
It has two. One of them's a bit one of them's really good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um where, she sees a Santaran escape pod
Mm-hmm.
and loses her freaking mind.
Yeah.
It's as if she saw a Dalek. And here you can clearly see why. One Santaran is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. Oh, hugely, especially at that time period.
Yeah.
But no, I just think it's a really good performance all around here. Like, we get the usual witty one-liners, the charm, the great interaction with the villains, and I think a really good rapport with Sarah Jane.
Yeah. I do love his daring your man on the flying trapeze line. I don't know why there's something about that line. It just sticks in my head.
I know it's meant to be more like Earl Flynn esque, swashbuckling, but it just comes across like Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
Yikes and away. Oh.
Right rope.
Yes. Oh. Sorry, now I have the Daffy Duck Looney Tunes of him as Robin Hood, and it's just I'm going to be giggling internally now for hours. So, We have the companions of the piece. There's Sarah Jane and Hal.
Shall we do Sarah Jane first, or do you want to do Hal first?
No, let's do Sarah Jane first.
I've been waiting for this for so long. Because I tried to be like, obviously we watch a story a week. And sometimes that can be kind of hard to keep up with, I'll be honest. Some of these stories are very long. And so with the exception of I watch New Who, so I obviously watched Jodie Whittaker's run. I haven't rewatched any stories I've watched before.
Yeah.
So for this whole time we were doing this podcast, I was like, I want to talk about Sarah Jane. I want to watch Sarah Jane. And like, I haven't watched Sarah Jane Adventures. I haven't watched anything with her in it. Because I wanted to wait until we could actually discuss it like properly on the pod, as opposed to me like if I'd watched Time Warrior a couple of months ago and then we were watching it again for this, the effect wouldn't have been the same. So I'm just so glad that we actually get to watch it and talk about her character.
I cheated a small bit and I started listening to her Big Finish audio series again because it's so fucking good. But
I cheated in a roundabout way that doesn't really count, because I listened to the latest Big Finish Sarah Jane stuff. But it's not Liz, it's Sadie. So that doesn't count in my mind. However, this I think is a fantastic introduction to the character of Sarah Jane. One of the things I love about it is it starts with her doing her job.
Yes.
Sarah Jane Smith is a journalist. Right. There are times in the show when they will forget this fact, but that is her job. Her job is to investigate things. She's an investigative journalist as well. She's not just like the weather column person. Do you know what I mean? She actually goes out and does investigations and stuff. So I love how it starts with her doing her job. I also love how she didn't get all up in arms and like panicky when the doctor was like, yeah, well, you must have written that when you were 5. If that's really you. She just sort of looked at him all doe-eyed and was like, you're not going to tell on me, are you? Like, this is clearly how she gets all her scoops, just wrapping men around her little finger and kind of like play all doe-eyed. But it's so funny later on. I don't know, like, one of my favourite bits of the story, it happens in episode 1 when Rubish is sort of telling the doctor, like, oh, she's not Lavinia Smith, and he's like, oh, because Lavinia Smith's in America. He's like, yeah, I do. Should we tell the Brigadier? And he's like, about what? About her. He's like, she could be a spy. And then Sarah just walks in and leans against the wall. It's like, hi. Because she knows he's talking about her. And she knows he's talking shit about her. And she's just like, I fucking dare you. I don't know why, but I just find it so funny. There's the way she acts in those scenes. Her time in the past is fantastic. I think this is probably one of the funniest but also best written trips to the past by someone who didn't know they were traveling to the past that we have had, because she spends like the first 10 minutes trying to rationalize it out. This is a village pageant. It's a rag day event, which I just found hilariously funny. Rag meaning raise and give, which is a fundraising thing carried out by universities. She's like, oh, it's one of those tourist attractions. But she spends her whole time trying to rationalize it out. But then once she realizes that it's actually true, she just goes with the flow.
Yeah.
To the point where she's leading a raid to get the doctor out of the castle. It's like, I fucking love it.
So good.
No need for rescues here. She's the one doing the rescuing of the doctor twice. If you consider her first kidnapping of him a rescue. And her outfits are amazing. I do love that blazer suit combo. Her performance is fantastic, and her little jumps to see over the parapets, because Liz is actually quite short. So her little jumps to see over the parapets was very cute.
It's very Gimli at Helm's Deep.
Yeah, but adorable and not slightly embarrassing. Overall, though, I think for an introductory story, this is the type of introduction that Joe should have gotten. Because this is the type of introduction that Liz Shaw got.
Yeah.
I think Katie was kind of short shrifted in that respect. In terms of the three, the John Pertwee Dr. Angels of Liz Shaw, Joe Grant, and Sarah Jane. I think Liz was kind of shafted in that. In comparison to the other two.
I just had a really mean thought. You know, there's that meme of like the three heads of Ghidorah, like where like there's one looking fierce, one looking side-eyed, and then there's just one looking derpy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like that came into my head there, and it's like only from Terror of the Autons. If you had started off with Mind of Evil, much better taste left in the mouth.
Yeah. How about you? What's your read on Sarah Jane and her first story out of the gate?
So the first thing that came into my head, right, was a line from a movie that I absolutely love, but seems to get an awful fucking stick, is the 1980s version of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Mm.
But Skeletor just says this wonderful line goes, "Everything comes to he who waits," and I have waited so very long for this moment. Yeah, like it's finally happened. Much like you, I really wanted to go ahead and watch some of my favorite stories, but I was like, nope, must behave.
I love how you went with He-Man. I went with Hannibal Lecter. Similar concept.
Similar.
All good things to those who wait.
Those can wait. Yeah. But both villains. What does that say about us? But like, what an intro for a companion. One thing that I love, right, is that it turns the formula completely on its head by having Sarah think that the doctor is the culprit.
Oh yeah.
It kind of harkens back to Ian and Barbara, where they thought like that maybe he had kidnapped Susan. Like, the think that like, the doctor is the villain of the piece, I think was fantastic. I love how she gets stuck into things, like actively taking part in the commando raid, as you said. Helping out with the defense of the castle with the little jump ups, that thing. But yeah, no, like just like an investigative journalist who is equal parts determined, but also coy and very smart. I think she's a good judge of character, so I think that's how she knows to wrap her hands around someone or wrap people around her fingers. Yeah, just like strangle them.
One thing actually you mentioned, like that she kind of turns the sort of the stereotypical Doctor Who format on its head.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who stows away in the TARDIS.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, like she creeps in and gets caught up in the story. It's not like that he kidnaps her or that he invites her along. It is the one thing she has in common with Stephen, which is that they both stowed away.
Yeah. Also, no, Ben and Polly, he didn't kidnap them. They snuck on board.
But they didn't sneak on board in the same way. Like, he didn't know she was there. He didn't know Stephen was there either. Like, I mean, stowaway in that context. Those two ran in the door and he just fucking kept going.
Yeah, but that's the thing, like, so. But yeah, no, like, she snuck on board, and I actually enjoyed it because, again, kind of turning the whole thing on its head, like, it's bigger on the inside, but it's like, no, it's a police box on the outside. So it's like, it's in a way, it's almost like Spider-Man Homecoming. Look, we all know the story about Uncle Ben. We're just going to allude to it. We're not going to fucking hash it out again.
Yeah. And then we get to Spider-Man No Way Home and we all cry.
Yeah, exactly. But no, like, again, in a way, she seems to remind me of Barbara because the abilities are already there. It just needs the situation to unlock them. Like, clearly she's someone that didn't have to have a prior experience with the Doctor to be able to be comfortable enough to lead the commando raid or to come up with the idea of it. No, it's like clearly that was something that she had in her own experiences encountered and then brought it into this to apply it to this otherworldly scenario. Whereas, like, say, other companions, like, again, like maybe Polly would have had to have the experiences to gain that confidence in which to do that.
Yeah, I think another like big comparison, and again, this isn't meant in a negative light. It's just to show like the change in how the characters are written. Sarah Jane, again, a big feminist character. This will come up a lot this season. Comes up less so after the season, but comes up a lot this season. She goes off the big thing, like, I'm not gonna be the one just making coffee for you. Do you know, like, I've got a job to do, you fucker. Like, she comes into this with a career, and so did Joe, but Joe's career wasn't respected. And she was treated like a child. At least in this story, the Doctor sort of plays around with her a bit in terms of, like, has, a bit of banter with her and stuff, but, he doesn't treat her like a child either.
No, he doesn't. He treats her no for the moment,
Mm.
but he treats her like a young lady,
Yeah,
essentially,
yeah.
or young woman.
She's kind of accepted for what she is
Hmm.
and who she is, whereas again in those first few stories, Joe sadly wasn't, which I think is again just a massive disservice to the character and to Katie as well, who deserve better.
Yeah. Now we could spend an entire fucking hour just talking about Sarah Jane. So how about we move on to the
And we
next
have
person?
done many
Yes,
times in the past.
many times, many fine cadets. So next on the list is Hal.
I'm Hal. Last name the Archer.
Do, 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 do,
I
do,
wonder,
do.
like, how many people, how many like, you know, soldiers are in Sir Edward's retinue named Hal? That Lady Eleanor has to specify. No, not Hal the swordsman, Hal the Archer. It's like because in my head that's his name. His name is Hal the Archer. It's like his name is Hal. Like what the hell? Anyway, what did you think of Hal?
Um, I really enjoyed Hal. Like, I love the fact that he never thinks of betraying Sir Edward and Lady Eleanor. Like, because that's the whole thing that's said the whole time is that because of the Crusades and a lot of the men have been levied away from the surrounding castles, Irongron has free reign.
Mm,
When without the Crusades, he wouldn't. He would just be like a leader of a band of thieves on the road.
mm.
But rather than kind of going over to Irongron's side or selling out Edward and Eleanor, he stays loyal to them, which is great.
I I will contest one thing on that
Okay, yeah.
because my only big issue with Hal is he gave up Lady Eleanor super fucking quickly. Like the dude before him, the steward or whoever
The
who was
messenger, yeah.
serving the messages, he had to be tortured and then hypnotized before he
Hmm.
gave up any information. Hal just threw Lady Eleanor under the bus or under the cart, as it were, at the first fucking question. He didn't say that he came that Sir Edward sent him. He said, I was sent by Lady Eleanor. Like he threw her under the bus straight away. He never once tried to pretend that it was just him on his own. Whereas if you compare him to the I said the steward or the messenger or whatever position that guy held, he had to be tortured and hypnotized before he gave up anything. So while he is incredibly loyal to them, he did also throw her under the bus or cart.
So I've actually, I no, not disputing that, but I want to get your opinion on something, okay?
Hmm.
So with the messenger, he they knew that he worked for Edward,
Hmm.
but what he refused to give up was the contents of the letter that was talking about the preparations of the local lords and getting their men together. Whereas Hal gave up the name of his employer. Now, it's still admitting who he's working for. But do you think Hal admitting who he's working for is slightly less kind of like dangerous than giving up information of an alliance?
No, because they knew who the steward was. I'm going to say
Yeah.
steward, so I can't remember his position. So I'm going to say he was the steward. They knew who
Hmm.
he was.
Hmm.
There was no denying that.
Yeah.
Like, they knew that he, reported to Sir Edward. There was no denying that.
Hmm.
He just didn't give up the fact that Sir Edward was planning on, getting a group of people together to take down Irongron.
Hmm.
They didn't know who Hal worked for. They didn't know who he was. They just said, Did Sir Edward send you? And he said,
Hmm.
No, Lady Eleanor did. Like, don't fucking tell them that. Like, he has basically said that A, Sir Edward doesn't have control of his own castle because his wife is giving the orders. And B, even though they can't get a band of people together, they're still coming to get you. Like,
Hmm.
he gave up the fact that it was a deliberate assault, whereas the other guy had to be hypnotized in order to do the same.
Yeah. No, no, yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. All right. I just wanted to know, like, one piece of would one betrayal of information outweigh the other betrayal of information?
No, because one was also deliberate and the other one was forced by a hypnotism.
Hmm. Cool.
But it's not taking away from his loyalty overall.
Yeah.
It's just, I
No,
think on that one
it's
particular thing, I do have to call that out because that was a major
yeah.
issue I had with him.
No, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. Other stuff that I like was, no, he did attest to Sarah's bravery and courage in the escape from the castle, which I loved. I thought that was cool. But then, like, when they have the raid, he does bring up the idea of her, like, gender. Like, it's like, oh, like, I'm not sure if this is women's work, I was like, okay, but is that just because you want her to stay safe, or do you legitimately think that women have no place in the fight because you're just after fucking attesting to her bravery earlier on? So I'm going to lean more towards the thing of trying to keep her safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the difference between Hal and the Doctor in that context is Hal is actually from the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
And fighting in wars isn't women's work in the Middle Ages. So I think for Hal, it was, he stood up for Sarah. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have gotten out. 110%. That doesn't mean, like, she was also taken captive in the same way he was, and they kind of escaped together.
Yeah.
That's very different than her participating in a raid deliberately. Like, one is escape, the other is attack. Escape, good. Attack, women shouldn't be attacking.
Yeah.
In this day and age, we'd say, fuck you. In the Middle Ages, I get where he's coming from.
Yeah. I think the one last thing that I did like about him was that I like the fact that he's the savior at the end of the day. I like the one that he, like, because again, I think it just adds, like, we're told that Sontarans are only weak to a strike to the Provic vent, and, like, to put it into context, like, this is the thermal exhaust port on the fucking Death Star.
Yeah.
Like, it's a scaled down narrow weakness at the base of the neck, and Lynx even says it means we constantly have to face our enemies. It's very Spartan in the military mentality, and, like, we know that Hal is a very skilled archer. So, like, I think having him be the one to get Lynx and, like, the Achilles heel thing, I think, again, it just adds to the threat of the Sontarans for me.
I think it adds to the threat of Sontarans, but I think also adds to the threat is I do wonder if it was by accident. Because no one told Hal that they're only weak in the Provic. He told Rubish. He didn't tell Hal that he's only weak at that point. Or if you don't see him do it on screen, he may have done it off screen. So you imagine, like, was Hal aiming for his head and missed? Or did he just see a hole in the back of this guy's suit and go, I'll aim for that?
I'm going to possibly say told off screen.
Told off screen makes more sense.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just like a fluke.
To the novelization. That's our fucking answer to get out of anything.
Yeah, the novelizations that were often written years after the actual
show. Let's work out the kinks, because some Irish prick is going to raise these questions.
Did you just call me a prick?
No, no. I meant me. But granted, yes, you're the one that raised the question.
But yeah, I think Hal's a great character. I can understand why Barry would have considered him for a companion role. I think it would have been very interesting in a very Zoe and Jamie kind of way to have the modern companion and the medieval archer. Mainly because, unlike Zoe and Jamie, where Jamie kind of had this, like, oh, well, she's not that much smarter than me type of thing going on.
Yeah.
Hal and Sarah get along really well.
They do.
They work quite well together. They seem to respect each other. They're, like, other than, I don't think this is women's work, and her saying, well, I'm the one who knows what he fucking looks like, moron. Like, that's the only bit. And it's not an argument, it's just a comment and a response. And getting on with it. So I can understand where they're going to keep him, why they consider keeping him as a companion role. Like I said, my only call out was how easily he gave up Lady Eleanor. And I don't know, I think maybe they didn't want to do a second hypnotized scene in the same, like, that would have been the third hypnotized moment, because he would have had the steward and Sarah Jane and Hal, and there's probably a bit much. It just seemed like he was just being a dick to Lady Eleanor.
Fuck that bitch, I
was like, I will never give up my lord. His wife, though, she's a pain in the hole. Yeah, it was her.
Yeah. So now we have Rubish.
Yeah, so I mentioned how I didn't want how I had initial thoughts going in,
Mm.
and I sort of started half writing the character descriptions last night before I ever watched it.
All right.
Um, One of the ones that changed was Rubish. And I said that I saw him as a prominent character, and I'll explain why. So, through all my previous watchings of the story, I always thought Rubish was kind of rubbish. Um, yes, I had to make the pun. Um, because for a lot of the story, he's of no help, and he's kind of unintentionally getting in the way.
Mm.
Never deliberately and never maliciously, but he kind of gets in the way. Um, like when the doctor first sees him in Aragorn's castle, and he's like, leave, but I don't want to leave. Think about all I could learn here. It's like, dude, you are captive in the Middle Ages, and your friends are being used as slaves. Get your fucking shit together, man. Like, time to go. Time to get out of Dodge. And the fact that he just potters around. Like, oh yeah, I tried to wake them up, but they're not waking up. And I was like, I wasn't a big fan of it.
Mm.
On subsequent viewing, though, I really have come to appreciate him in a different way. He is the unassuming background character
Mm.
that is constantly paying attention to everything.
Yeah.
Even if he can't see it properly, he's still paying attention. And when there is, and this is the thing that sort of changed my mind on him.
Mm-hmm.
When there is a plan, an
Yeah.
actual plan, he's more than happy to help out. It's like
Yeah.
the first meeting, the doctor didn't have a plan. He just had a we have to escape, and he's like,
Mm.
I can't see for shit, so no. But when the doctor actually has a plan, he's like, oh yeah, I'll do the polka time, I'll do this, I'll do that. He's happy to help out in that respect, which I like.
Mm.
Also, he clattered Links in the probing vent. What is not to love about that?
Yeah. Like, no, there's an awful lot to love about it. Like, I enjoyed Ruvish because, no, very similar to yourself. Like, I was like coming into it, I was like, oh, he's gonna be a fucking pain in the hole, and like, I didn't think he's kind of a good foil to the doctor.
Mm.
Like this sort of like absent-minded professor type thing, like where he just starts randomly drawing equations on the TARDIS and just not badgering him about what should we do about Sarah. On the subject of being trapped in the castle, right?
Mm.
Now, it's clear like his scientific curiosity, is well over his own public safety. And I hope that he never ends up in this scenario again because like that's not good. On the subject of the guys being hypnotized, now we know that he's very very short sighted,
Mm.
and he fashions himself a monocle, which I think is just fucking incredible. A monocle on a stick. Do you think that his blindness probably prevented him from seeing just like how bad his friends were?
I
Like when
don't
he
think
gets,
so because he's well aware of the fact that they're not being fed properly. He's well aware of the
hmm,
fact that they don't sleep.
hmm,
Like he's aware of he can't maybe see physically what they look like,
hmm,
or at least not very well, but like he is well aware of what's happening, and like
hmm,
he has the freedom to eat the food that's provided and to sleep when he wants or rest when he wants or whatever, and
hmm,
he can see that the rest of them aren't. So I think that's one of the reasons why I put him in a prominent character and not a companion,
yeah,
because he has this sort of it's completely unintentional.
hmm,
Again, it's the absent-minded professor thing of it comes across like he doesn't care, which I
yeah.
don't think is true. I think it's just not fully registering in his brain.
I think the scientific curiosity probably rules the mind a small bit more than the rational mind.
Mm.
And like, we've talked about characters like that before, and we're going to be talking about characters in the future in a very similar vein. But yeah, I would definitely place him as a prominent character. While he does help out, his initial reluctance to do anything really did like. Ugh. He
Yeah,
does get on your
as it
fucking
wouldn't it
nerves.
wouldn't have made him a villain or anything of the
No,
sort,
no,
but
Jesus, no,
it
not at all.
firmly entrenched him in
No,
prominent
no.
character
Like
history.
he's definitely not Lesterson from like Power of the
No,
Daleks. Absolutely not. Like
no.
he's, but again, like it's I've traveled through time. There's alien technology at work here. This is everything I suppose a scientist might dream of. And
Mm,
again, it's the curiosity getting the better of him. But when he sees that Lynx is like when he actually sees that fucking Lynx is a very bad dude, then it's like, okay, I'll clatter this fucker on the back of the neck with a stick.
yeah.
And then we have the villains. We have Iron Gron and Lynx.
Okay, I'm just gonna say it now, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some weird like parallel Earth, we need to have Iron Gron and Lynx as like this like buddy comedy, the odd couple type things. Like
Yeah.
he's a medieval warrior, he's from outer space, and together they're trying to solve crime or whatever the fuck the case would be. Like
Yeah.
together they are so fucking funny. It is brilliant, and I need them on like a buddy comedy sitcom.
No, do you know what we actually need? We need a version of the wacky races where they continually try to take over Sir Edward's castle. Just the two of them, like fucking Iron Gron can be Dick Dastardly, Lynx can be fucking I know I think he's more like Clunk and Blood Axe could be fucking Muttley or something like that.
um
Oh,
oh no, but yeah, we'll talk about them both individually in a second, but I
yeah.
their dynamic together
Oh, it's amazing.
is
It's
so interesting to watch.
it's so good. Like I really really enjoy Iron Gron. Like
Mm.
David Dacre does like he does a fantastic job. Like he has all like the language and like like calls everyone's like dogs and curs and like all these like medieval curses that he would levy against Lynx and like by my beard this fellow gives me sport and all this type of shit. It's like he's the loudest smartest bully in the pack.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's essentially what he is. And like when he's like there's the whole thing of all the guys are shooting at the doctor and the doctor's just dodging one at a time. He's laughing and he's like, yeah, I was like, fuck it, like I might keep this guy on, as a bit of a laugh, That's what it is. It's like he in a way he kind of reminds me of Odysseus from the Mythmakers in
Mm.
like this very brutish character that seems to have like some bit of a fucking twisted sense of humor. But what I love about him is that while he does seem to be very like he's an aggressive person, he's aggressive personality, and it's just all this type of stuff. He's smart enough to know when to tighten the reins on the guys
Yeah.
because when he continually makes threats about killing Lynx, and Blood Axe is like, yo, like I'm kind of confused as to why you didn't do it in the first place, and you just see his eyes dart around. It's like, well, it's like, well, I'm smarter than you, Blood Axe. Like I had to keep him alive to get everything that I need. Yes, that'll do. And Blood Axe is like, oh yeah, there's a reason you're the brains in this outfit. But then like it's and you have this thing like where you'd be constantly wondering, would Blood Axe betray him?
Mm.
But at the end, it's like he keeps as much as he gives out to the guys, like he keeps them like entertained with food and wine and this whole thing of like all the loot will have and all this type of stuff. So he knows when to use the carrot as well as the stick.
Yeah. I
I
think
think
Iron Gron, he's a very good leader in a way.
he is he is
Of that type of band of characters.
yeah.
He's a very good leader. Like I was pretty much. Is it wrong that I actually like him? He's weirdly charming in his own way. Like
Yeah.
not like in a sexy charming, but in a sort of like could charm you into giving you whatever he wanted without you fucking realizing it, kind of a. But he's also a total barbarian.
There's something of a Khal Drogo about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about him, and you kind of hinted at there, is that like while he does sometimes try and cover his own ass with his men, so we're like, oh well, of course, blah blah blah. He may not be able to read, but he is smart. And we can see this. Like his men are terrified of Lynx. They give into their superstitions straight away. What does he see? He sees opportunity and he embraces it 110%. He doesn't bat an eye. Like Link starts asking for like high capacitor computers and whatever, and he's like, as opposed to saying like, what is this magic? He's just like, we don't have those.
Yeah.
He doesn't. It's concede the fact he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. He's like, no, we don't have him. But I can give you a forger.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you a weaponsmith. I can give you those things, no problem. But like he sees an opportunity with Lynx of this guy needs help. I can help him, and he can help me. Great, fantastic. And in fairness, for the most part, he leaves Lynx alone to
Mm.
do his stuff. Yeah, he demands his presence every now and again, and demands results on what was promised to him. Because like we can see in some of the scenes that like Lynx has hypnotic control over some of Iron Grand's men.
Mm-hmm.
The guys making the weapons. Like
Yeah.
they move the same way the scientists move.
Mm-hmm.
So like Iron Grand has given up a lot to help him, and so he obviously demands, back what was promised. But he, their relationship is so interesting to watch. Like it's a friendship. It's an attempt at a master servant dynamic from Iron Grand's perspective.
Yeah.
But there's also this underlying current of mistrust that comes across in the fact that he calls him Toad Face, that he calls him like all those kind of
Yeah.
names. And he's constantly threatening him because he's like, I'll keep him around so long as it serves me. As soon as
I
it doesn't, though.
Yeah, because the word friendship there, that's kind of a very loose thing. Because no, I agree like that from Iron Grand's perspective, it's master and servant. From Lynx's perspective,
It's
it's like
master and dog from
it's
Link's
yeah,
perspective.
it's like an ant colony almost. Like, I'll introduce something here and just see exactly what they do.
Mm. But I think when Link's like, I didn't, I never thought when I first saw you that I'd come to love you like a brother. But
Yeah,
like that seems weird to say to someone who you also threaten to kill every 5 minutes.
yeah,
But if you think in the context of Iron Grand's band of
mm,
misfit toys, like of Blood
yeah,
Axe or whatever, there's a brotherhood there among them. But he'd cut any one of them if they tried to supersede him or if they tried to undermine him. And he treats Lynx in the same way. So when he says that he sees Lynx as a brother and that they have this great friendship, it's the same type of friendship he has with Blood Axe. You're my
yeah,
friend, as long as you're fucking useful to me. Try and get above your station, though, and I'm gonna fuck you up.
yeah. uh so how did you get the name Blood Axe? Well, I killed people with my axe. It's all bloody. How did you get the name Short Spear? Please don't ask that question. um, yeah, like no, like Iron Grand really helps make this a good story. Like
He
it's
really
just
does. And also, the, the guy who plays him is fantastic. He really, really is. But,
oh,
like,
he's amazing.
I would have loved to have seen this story of Brian Blessed because, like, Iron God is a character that was written
Oh,
for Brian Blessed's
he
voice.
really is. He really, really is.
It would have been amazing.
So how about the other half of your buddy cop?
So the Suntarans are one of, if not my favorite classic monster. Um, I love them in this story. I love them in the Suntaran experiment. I love them in other stories that we see them in. And I was particularly excited, and you may remember like when the trailers dropped for Doctor Who
Yeah.
Flux, and when that second episode of the Flux series came out,
Mm,
I loved the Suntarans, and it all started with Lynx. It
it
all
did.
started with this one Suntaran, because
Mm,
like you said, you can see how deadly they are when they're on their own, but
mm.
also what Kevin put into his performance was amazing.
Oh, like like much in the same way as the guy that played Islier
Mm,
in Curse of Peladon, who had previously played like other characters.
mm,
A recurring villain, I think, is helped by the performance of the actor that gives it.
yeah,
So, like, while some of them may look sort of naff by today's standards,
mm.
the performance given, you forget about all the fucking weird prosthetics and makeup and bin liners that are on them. You're just drawn to the actor because they make it look like a credible fucking threat.
I think
And
that
Kevin does that here.
Yeah, I think that's the difference that I find with like the Cybermen and the Suntarans. So, or the
Mm,
Cybermen and the Daleks, rather. It's like here, like Lynx is a character. Islir
yeah,
was a character. I'm not a big
yeah,
fan of the Ice Warriors, but I was a fan of Lynx, or as a
yeah.
fan of Islir rather. I think the
Hmm.
only reason why the Ice Warriors aren't higher in my list of like, um, villains
Hmm.
is because Islir wasn't my introduction to them.
No.
If Islir had been my introduction in the same way that Lynx is my introduction here, I think they would have been higher up. Similarly with the Silurians.
Yes.
I think I had seen the New Who Silurians before I watched the Silurian story.
Let me think back to my memory of stuff. Very
Or it
possibly
would have
that
been
you did.
around the same time.
It would have been around the same time, I think.
And I think the New Who Silurians kind of put me off. But if we think back to the Silurians, I don't remember any of their names, which is a problem. Because then they become the Silurians, like the
Well,
Daleks and the Cybermen. But they didn't have names, as far as I remember.
no, none of the Silurians. We gave them monikers.
Yeah.
But
like the leader Silurian was fantastic in that
yeah,
story, do you know?
the
So
young one and the scientist, they
the
were
young one, the
both.
scientist, like, but I think with villains like the Daleks and the Cybermen, because of, and this is the irony of the Santarans, who are a clone race,
Yeah.
with the Daleks and the Cybermen, one is the same as another is the same as another, for the most part. The casing is a different color. I don't fucking care. I never pay attention to the color anyway. So for me, like, Kevin did so much in this performance, and like, it's just, he's so good. I just love it, and I love Lynx though, because Lynx, like I said, he's like a little boy going, "What'll happen if I do this? This is fucking hilarious." And like even the way the Doctor describes it as, like, Lynx getting involved in the war, like the battle between Iron Gron and Sir Edward's forces, whatever, because Lynx is bored.
Yeah.
And
He wants to see a
he's
fight.
poking the ants to see what they'll do.
Yeah.
Like, Lynx had no problem providing him. And I suppose the thing as well is that, like, from Lynx's perspective, Lynx didn't just hypnotize Iron Gron. And this is again where this buddy comedy thing comes from. He could have very easily hypnotized Iron Gron and Bloodaxe and the whole lot of them to get what he wanted. But he didn't. He actually set an agreement with him and delivered on it. Do you know? And yeah, he was quite happy to fuck off. And, if you're still in the castle when I leave, well, that's your problem. But he did warn him. Do you know? And in fact, he's like, "Oh, I'll be quite happy to leave Earth under the control of King Irongron." Blake's fucking laughing his ass off all the way back to the Santaran fleet. But he's just so interesting. It's such a great dynamic. I just think they're brilliant.
You actually raised a very good point there about the irony that you like the Santarans because they're a clone race where, Cybermen and Daleks are very similar to one another. I think it's by virtue of the fact that we're introduced to one.
Yes.
Because, like, we'll get to it down the line, Christopher Eccleston's first Dalek story has a solitary Dalek in it. Yes. And that is a great episode.
If that was the first Dalek story I'd seen, I probably would react to the Daleks differently. But when you see them as just the Daleks, because I'm the type of person, I like the personal touch, because I'm more of a fan of the sort of crazed scientist type villains, or like the humanoid type villains, just because I really, I can sort of imagine what they're thinking a lot better. But yeah, anything else you want to add on Lynx?
So, much like yourself, and like I had to like really stop my future knowledge of coming into my analysis here, I really enjoyed the Santarans on so many levels. They're not always done justice, unfortunately, but as a concept, they are fantastic.
Yeah.
I loved Lynx because, as you said, he felt like a character. And again, credit to Kevin Lindsay for the performance and the guys that did the makeup, because while obviously not to the same level of budget, to me it felt very similar to the makeup from the Planet of the Apes movies in the sense of how well it seemed to fit. You could tell like the majority of it was just a prosthetic, but like some of it just seemed to fit his eyes and his mouth so well that it all moved together in sequence. It was great. I loved it. The aesthetic of Lynx, and again, it's great because Lynx is an officer, right? That's one. And his choice of weapon, it's an electronic baton, which, if you think about it, because he's an officer, is probably very similar to like a swagger stick.
Yeah.
Someone would have. Like, so I can imagine, like, and we see it, like regular Santaran soldiers have rifles or, guns or whatever. But having like this swagger stick, it's like, yeah, okay, he's an officer, so he's clearly someone that's fucking a threat. I love like the base of the neck weakness because it just really makes them a very difficult villain to overcome.
Mm.
You know, like where like there's several ways around the Dalek now that we've seen, whereas with Santarans, it's like no, you really gotta fucking get them at the base of the neck. Like you have to. It's almost like a thing from Kelly's Heroes. It's like, you know, they've only got one weak point, and that's their ass. You got to hit it point blank, and you got to hit it from behind. Um, but and like again, the concept like so like if one Santaran is like this, and like he says the the batches of clones like hatch in the millions,
Mm.
and like this is a never ending war between them and the Routons.
Mm.
Like so, if you think about like, you know, one way the Santarans are essentially the clone troopers from Star Wars,
Yeah.
and like there's just so much character here. It's so good. Lynx really hooks you in. Like
Mm.
he's not just a dumb brute. He's smart.
Mm.
He's incredibly intelligent, and I love seeing because I think it is a rarity, right? Outside of the Master, where the Doctor has a threat that is both physical and mental in the same person,
Yeah.
and like he easily takes down the Doctor. Um, because the one thing that, you know, it didn't need to go into the summary, but Santarans, because of where they come from, they live in a higher density world,
Mm.
so like they're much more compact, but they have the proportionate strength because of they had to live on like those higher density worlds. So yeah, just a great like, and again the dynamics between everyone here, especially between the Doctor and Iron Gran and Lynx, it's a nice triangle of a threat.
Mm. I just remember my two favorite lines of Lynx in this story.
Mm-hmm.
One isn't a line of Lynx; it's just a scene that comes into my head,
Yeah.
which is like, you know, I claim this planet and all of its moons for the Entire Empire.
Yeah.
But we live here. Do you have a flag?
And he plants a fucking flag.
It's a really shit flag as well.
Yeah.
It's like just like um but then the second one that I love, because it's just his line delivery is so funny, and this is all Kevin. Like, do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And again, this is the thing, because a lot of time with the Daleks, it's like the operator is one thing and the voice is something else.
Mm.
This is all Kevin is. Oh, you have a secondary reproductive cycle. You should get rid of that.
It's inefficient.
I just love the delivery though. It's so funny.
I think my favorite Lynx moment, and again, it speaks perfectly to the whole concept of Suntarans, is and no, I have it here. I think I have it.
Do, 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 do,
Oh
do.
yeah, so it's like the Doctor's like, you know, I'll assist you with the repairs of your ship, and like in return, you know, get rid of the weapons and help me get Iron Gran and his men out of the castle. Like, you know, and he goes, "You wish for my answer, Doctor? Then here it is," and he just fucking shoots him.
Yeah.
I just loved that sequence because it's just, oh, it's so good. It's brutally ruthless, but it fits a character like Link so well. So we find ourselves at that old familiar stomping grounds, which is the overall section where we give our scores out of 5. So Trish, how would you like to score this one?
So I had to try really hard not just to give it a 5 before ever watching it.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult now for the next 17 stories.
Yeah, it's like Sarah Jane's in it, give it a 5. Sarah Jane's in it, give it a 5. But being honest though, once I sat down to watch it,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't think of anything to dock a point for. I genuinely couldn't. Like, we have talked before about how there are some stories that go on too long. You know,
Yes.
we said it last week with the Green Death.
Hmm.
Didn't need to be 6 episodes. This story does not have an ounce of fat on it. It has great pacing. We get, like, if you think about it, we get a new companion introduction, a new villain introduction, and a fantastic story on top of that, all in 4 episodes. Just 4.
Yeah.
You know, and not a single scene is wasted. Everything pushes the plot. Everything develops the characters. You're never looking around going, okay, we're having another drive here, talk to this, drive back there, talk to that. Yeah, there are talking scenes, but they're always interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It was very well written, and the directing was very good, and the acting was phenomenal. Like Lynx and Iron Grant probably take top prize in terms of the guest cast.
Mm-hmm.
But like Liz Sladen was fantastic right out of the gate. And like for her first story as well, do you know, like it's not an easy thing to do. Um so I think all of that was fantastic, and it was funny. Do you know, I was laughing my ass off at several moments of it, which is great. Like I genuinely cannot think of a single thing to dock a point for. So surprising, probably nobody. It's getting a 5 for me. How about you?
Cool. So, as anyone that's stuck with us since we did The Crusade, you'll know that I'm a sucker for anything set in the medieval period. And if you introduce a sci-fi element to that, I'm yours completely. Um, so that added with great all-round performances, a contender for best supporting cast that we've had in the entire, what are we at, 70 stories that we've gone through now. Great new interesting villain, great story-based villain as well, outside of Iron Gran, outside of Links in Iron Gran. Great new companion, the Doctor in top form as always. Yeah, like this is an instant classic. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. I completely agree with you that there's not a single moment wasted in this. It's so much fun to watch the entire time. It's got action, it's got humor, it's got really, really good dialogue and great character interactions. And yeah, so yeah, it's a 5 out of 5. I could just like talk about this for hours.
Which, as we said before, we have done
We have
many
done
times
so.
over.
Now, since I found out that you gave it a 5, I've been going back through the scores, and I think this is the first time we've had back to back season openers that have received a 5 from us.
Mm.
And also, I think it's the first time a new companion has been introduced and they have received a 5 on their very first story.
Yeah, I thought Spearhead had gotten a 5, but it hadn't. It was very close, though.
It was incredibly close, but we gave, it was Silurians was a 5.
Mm. But yeah, I think, watch time where it's so good. And to be honest, like, we've spoken before about how, like, Bob Holmes's stories that he's written in the past, how some of them, Spearhead, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Terror of the Autons,
Yeah.
Carnival of Monsters, I kind of liked it. You didn't. There was mixed opinions on that.
Yeah, mixed opinions. I have mixed
This is
feelings
the
about it.
Bob Holmes that we know and love. This
Yeah,
story right here.
we slugged through the fucking space pirates to get here.
Yeah, and like this, I think this story more than anything else sort of shows why he became script editor.
Hmm.
Do you know, like he's the one who's going to take over from Terrence when Terrence Dix leaves, and this story, or like, I can see everything in there that would make a great script editor. You know,
Yeah,
including taking a story in a time period that you fucking hate and making it great anyway.
that's the thing. Like, if you can do that with something that you do not like, I think it's fantastic. Because
Mm,
I just feel like he grasps the concept of what Who was meant to be. I think he just grasps what it's meant to be.
yeah. And so we come to the end of our first discussion of season 11 and our first Sarah Jane Smith story. Join us next week when we see if the Doctor is able to get Sarah home in Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Spoilers. I was like, for fuck's sake.
I wonder what the villain is going to be next time around. Invasion of the very specific man in the suit. Okay, cool, thanks very much. It's the man in the suit. The man in the suit is the bad guy.
Yes, exactly. Until next week, guys. Bye.
Bye.